Okay, here we go. Morning, Irene. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good, thank you. How are you, Sam?
I'm really good. And Irene is dialing in from Australia. So it's a beautiful 7 a.m. for her. I'm in
Mhm.
New Zealand, so it's 9 a.m. Can see we've got people joining from around the world, which is pretty cool. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Irene. We're so excited about this fireside, talking about the amazing work that you've been doing at TeachStarter. We are really excited about this session. Irene Geurtjens is an amazing people and culture leader who has been actually as part of the excellent community for a couple of years now and is one of our certified EX designers. Currently head of people and culture at TeachStarter, which has actually just been recently acquired. So I'm sure she'll tell us a little bit about that. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Irene, to start sharing your slides. And maybe you could kick off with a little bit of an intro about yourself, and then we'll jump in some fireside questions.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I've come from quite a traditional HR generalist career path. I've had about 15 years experience in generalist HR, various industries, more recently in standalone tech spaces. And when I joined TeachStarter, we're an education tech company, for those that don't know, a big presence in Australia. And the TeachStarter story I quite love to share because it comes from really humble beginnings. Jill was a primary school teacher. Her husband, Scott, talented graphic designer. And Jill experienced the work patterns, I guess, of a school teacher. Spending countless nights, staying up late, creating teaching resources, extracurricular materials for her students. And Scott helped her out by making those resources graphically appealing and fun to use in the classroom. So that's how it started. And, Jill's classmates took interest to the material she was creating. And that was the start of the business idea. And that's how TeachStarter was born. So going back to 2012 when it first started from as a newsletter being just circulated within the local Brisbane community. We then grew to a team of 40, not only across Australia, but also launched into the US market with a small team. And then a huge milestone for TeachStarter was actually last year when they got to a scale to sell the company to TES, which is a global education SaaS company. So now TeachStarter belongs to one of many impactful products that are changing the landscape for the education sector, which is pretty exciting. So it's a really nice feel-good story. Yeah.
And so tell us about your case study. What was the problem that you set about solving?
Yeah, sure. So it's a bit of an intertwined case study that I did, but there's almost two parts to it. So I guess the challenge that we had at the time was transforming our culture. So going from a small family run business to a high performing commercial operation. And, that meant the founders made the decision to take a step back and bring in an experienced CEO to take it to the next scaling point. Once I came on board, then we started to build out a new leadership team. And then we, started on our journey to be really intentional about the culture that we wanted to build for the future of the company.
It's actually really challenging too to go from that like small kind of like husband and wife owned business into like high performing business that ultimately gets acquired and transforming culture. So many opportunities and challenges in that. Tell us
Mm-hmm.
about where you started and how you specifically, how did you engage leaders early on?
Yeah, I guess what I've learned over time is that engaging the leadership team is super, super important from the get go. Like any initiative or anything that you do from a people perspective, start by getting the leadership involved and bring them on the journey around what problem you're trying to solve. The leadership team are the ones playing a big influence in helping shape your culture. They're working with your employees on a day to day basis. So Yeah, I've definitely learned that over time. I guess at Teach Starter, we were in a really nice starting position because we found people that were aligned with our new company values and the future goals of the company. So that was a nice synergy there. Our leaders were really empathetic leaders, are very deeply in touch with their teams. And I guess that's a testament to our CEO who kind of modeled those behaviors and set those expectations. Yeah, we organised an offsite. So for this particular initiative, how it came about, we organised a leadership offsite for a couple of days, everyone in the room at the same time, which was really beneficial. Having really open conversations. We used Miro for everything during those sessions and designed a few activities. So not only did we look at the business commercial side, but also what experience do we want them to have? What does it look like? What does it smell like? What does it feel like? So really getting deep around those questions. Another activity was designed at understanding, what do we see as a leadership team as our pillars of our employee experience? What sets us apart from other companies doing what they do, and what makes employees joining Teach Starter a unique experience? That's really what we were trying to build. And then the fourth activity was designed around, understanding what our psychological contract was between our employees and the company, which is quite a, interesting exercise to do. So asking the question, if a team member does X, what do they expect in return from Teach Starter?
Yeah, I love that. And the whole, I love that offer and expect framing. So, what do we offer as employees and what do we expect as employees? And then as leaders, what do we offer and what do we expect? It's such a great way to open up really strong conversations.
Yeah. So it was quite insightful because, all of the feedback that was coming back, the insights were showing similar things around, creating an environment that enables performance. And also our people telling us that they'd like the support and the tools to be able to grow their skills and develop their careers while at Teach Starter. I think everything was pointing to learning and development, but we were still quite unsure around, okay, well, what does that mean? What does learning, it's such a big topic, what does that mean? And part of my findings was that yes, everyone has very unique development needs. They like to learn in various different ways. Employees and managers actually wanted something that could give them the structure and the support to, take charge of their L&D path. So the design brief, going back to your question, the design brief that we came up with was how might we provide, how might we provide our team members with a personalized learning experience that gives them the tools to be successful?
I love that. And super interesting that you kind of went in with quite a broad sort of problem area. Yeah. Then you did a bunch of discovery. Everything was pointing in the direction of L&D being quite critical for this culture work that you wanted to do. And then you went back and did more discovery to say, well, what does L&D even mean to people? And was able to kind of narrow it again. So you kind of did that first problem discovery phase almost twice. Really clear. I love hearing about that. What role did kind of best practice or desktop research that you did play in the design phase? Because often we're designing with employees, we're getting all of their input, but there's also a role for expertise and experience and desktop research as well. How would you say that played a role for you?
Yeah, look, I did go out and look at what are the companies doing as part of their learning and development frameworks, just to get some inspiration and ideas. Sometimes I think, what is best practice these days? I know, it can be typically a guide and cover the basics and allow for consistency. But I do challenge people and challenge our audience here today to think about that in terms of if we're following how things have been done, previously, or best practice standards, then are we missing opportunities to, really lean into what our business actually needs, or what innovation we might be able to spark to do things a little bit differently and think outside the box. So I guess, once upon a time we all worked in an office 5 days a week, and that's obviously been tried and tested, that theory. It's a bit of a reminder around evolving circumstances can kind of redefine what best practice is. So
100%.
yeah, so just really honing into your people and what you're trying to achieve for your business, I think, is a really good starting phase.
Yeah, I love that. And actually something I picked up that you were talking about is when you were doing that second lot of discovery, you were kind of almost getting design ideas as well, because you were asking them what would they do. So it's kind of, I loved that you were starting the design in that phase too. Tell us about what you tested and prototyped. And did you do this with leaders and employees? How did you go about that next stage?
Yeah, I did. So I did a lot of pilot testing with the tool. Because that sort of made the basics of our framework. So used the leadership team, did rounds of testing. The leadership team, actually, because they're employees themselves, they report to our CEO. So they also experienced it from an employee perspective. So gaining all the feedback from the leadership team and our CEO to make sure it was fit for purpose and to take on any feedback that they had. And we actually did end up customizing a piece based on that feedback to make it more the tool more focused, not only about work goals, but also about what are your personal goals. So we wanted a more holistic L&D approach.
Thanks for highlighting that leaders are employees too. I say that because I feel like we sometimes forget that they also are having an employee experience. And I think I've said this on many of our events, but I think leaders in the world are having the hardest employee experience out of everyone right now. So 100%. Remembering that they're key stakeholders too is really awesome. How did you go about launching the initiative?
I used our regular all team meeting to do the launch, but also included a number of different other strategies to help bolster the communication around the launch and the effectiveness, I guess. So one thing that I did was introduced a development week. So it was 2 weeks, development planning week, we called it, where it created a bit of energy and hype and focus for this initiative. So everyone in the company for that 2-week period, their goal was to embark on this goal setting process around, well, what are your L&D goals? And I think the beauty of everyone doing it together at the same time is really impactful. I guess some of the key takeaways that I learned through that process was like over communicate. It sounds like you're talking about the initiative over and over again, but there's so much communication going around businesses these days that just over communicate everything.
Awesome. I love that. Now I've got a question that's been asked twice. How long did it take from the period that from when you started this project to when you were implementing?
That happened over a course of a few months. I'm going to say from memory, it was 3 to 4 months even.
Yeah. So that's from the minute you had that offsite with your leadership, or the leadership piece going through discovery and then into delivery, 3 to 4 months, you're thinking?
Yeah.
Okay.
And look, and if it takes longer, I think it's really important to do it properly rather than do it quickly.
I'd love to ask. So Hayley's just asked a really good question.
Yeah.
So it sounds like L&D came through really strongly as a sort of key theme or insight. Were there other insights that came through as your next areas of focus to contribute to that high performance culture that you're aiming for?
From memory, one of the pieces was around, how can our leaders have better coaching conversations with their team so that you get to a one-on-one and you're walking away feeling like it's actually been a really valuable session, and it's not just a tick box, what's our to-do list today. It's a more enriching conversation.
Awesome.
And that's a skill to have, right? That's that's quite difficult to naturally be able to coach. So I think a lot of training has to go into it for managers to be able to give feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, there's such a nice crossover between coaching skills and design skills, because really it's that kind of believing that the answers you are looking for and the people you're serving. There's a couple more questions coming up. Yeah. I would like to also ask, how did leaders respond to, you went from discovery with them in the really kind of the early stages to this project being implemented, and what was their overall buy-in to you taking this design-led approach and this being the biggest impact for employee experience? Did you get any feedback along the way about how you were working with them?
When I was presenting the information that came out of the one-on-one discovery sessions with employees, presenting that feedback to the team, and they're a bit surprised that we were kind of like, oh, you went out and asked people so there was a little bit like, oh, okay, that made sense. But I think that was part of getting the leadership buy-in, because you had this wealth of insights that helped you to determine the why are we doing this project. And that's one of the things that I always kept coming back to, is like, we are doing this project because this is the main thing that our employees want right now. This is what's really meaningful and invaluable for our people. This is what you've told us. So like, just reinforcing those sort of messages, I think, are really important as well, because it makes it a bit more credible when you're talking to the leadership team about, oh yeah, that's right, we're doing it because of this reason, and it's going to drive these outcomes for the business.
Another great question here from Kirsty. So, amazing work. Curious to know if the acquisition has had any impact on this. For example, do you feel like if you started this project today versus when you did it, would L&D still be the priority for your leaders and people? And will you do another round now that you've been acquired of Discovery?
Anytime there's a massive change in the business, you have to adapt and you have to change with the new focus of that business. So we went through as part of the integration, we actually went through a process of aligning tools and systems and ways of working. So we don't now use the developed tool as such. However, we're adapting what our new L&D program looks like moving forward. We do still have, we still support L&D. I think we practice what we preach because we're in that education space, but L&D is still 100% top of mind for us as a company and for our people. I think now being part of a bigger company, it's exaggerated those opportunities more, because there are so many. We're not a small team of 40 anymore. We're a global team of 600, which is, the amount of opportunities now and the resources to be able to deliver training has changed and enhanced it. So we've got a nice in-house training team that, every month we've got, training that is around developing and giving opportunities to our team members, and we still have those conversations through our one-on-ones around what are your individual goals and how can we support those as a business and as a leader.
Yeah. So it's actually, that's so interesting. So it sounds like the opportunities have increased, but actually you did need to change the tooling because now you're part of something bigger. So that's just like continuing to iterate, right? But keeping the goal that you got from that initial discovery. And just a question for you, what's the role that you now play in that organization of 600? Is TeachStart like still very much its own little entity, or have you been fully kind of, merged in?
But yeah, naturally, people's roles change within the business. I'm now part of a HR team, established HR teams. I've got 2 colleagues with me, which is pretty nice and exciting as well. And we work with our global UK team, right? So, so a lot of the strategy is more so not only thinking what does it look like from a local level, but what does it look like, the people strategy look like from a global level? So we're kind of thinking a lot bigger now. And, we've got a whole different mix of leadership team members and different personalities that have different needs. So, yeah, it does look very different to what we did have. And our Teach Starter team is still a Teach Starter product, and we've still got certain people in the team that are solely working on that product. But there are the people in the business that have their roles have changed, and they've got more opportunity to work on other products within the TES ecosystem as well. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Awesome. And maybe just a final question from me. If there's any final questions, please pop them in the chat. How has becoming a certified EX designer changed your approach to your role and your thinking about your career as well?
I think that's really down to, I've come from a very traditional generalist HR career where, yeah, I had been following best practice. And I think a big part of that change was going into a startup space where you're like, oh, a bit more agile and can do things really differently, easily or quickly. But yeah, I guess like now what I've learned with applying EX design and having that as a tool belt, a tool in my tool belt is around like, I don't have to have all the answers. I remember like a couple of times in my previous roles, all right, come into a new role, this is my HR roadmap, this is my HR strategy that I designed myself, take it to the leadership team. And then it would flop because it's like, well, the business doesn't actually need this stuff. It's what I was thinking at the time that the business needed. But yeah, so having, the concepts and the frameworks and the know-how of EX design has actually been a huge breath of fresh air for me, given me a lot more energy in my HR career. Now, when a problem comes along or, a need to do a specific initiative, I'm like, right, first place to start, go ask your people. And I guess, as I mentioned earlier before, another major thing for me is like, at times I can be a bit of a perfectionist and wanting to make it all perfect right at the front before you launch. And like, now knowing, well, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can iterate and adapt and improve things as you go along, like just getting started and getting, listening to your team and getting something delivered is a good start, and then iterate as you go along. So there's been huge learnings for me.
I mean, Irene, you've been such an amazing member of Excellent and a big contributor to our community. And I feel like that iterate thing is so, I think, relevant for so many of us that are kind of perfectionists, and we want to deliver something that's beautiful. But the reality is, if we don't show people the scrappiness of it to begin with, we're not going to get input like that because they think it's finished. And so there's so much unlearning for a lot of us to do before we can relearn this new way. And while it feels like common sense, it's still not the way that we've been trained. A lot of us have been trained. Also, it's not the way that our organizations expect us to operate. They come to us looking for answers, advice, expertise. And the reality is the world of work has changed so much. There is no one answer for the problems that we're facing today. And the only way we can do it is to design with our people. That's the way forward. So thank you so much for sharing so openly about the project. I love the fact that you did kind of 2 phases of discovery to get really clear on what the biggest opportunity was. The work that you've done is really impactful, and also you sharing it with our community today is also really impactful. So thanks, Irene. Have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.